All right. So the mission of the Parkinson Foundation of Oklahoma is to inspire hope and transform life for Parkinson patients and families in Oklahoma. We are an Oklahoma 501c3, and that's who we serve. And so we're hoping that tonight we're able to equip you with encouragement and good ideas. I've known Deb Hallisey for quite a few years, have interacted with her in different national settings. And I'll just, I guess I should give the official bio here. Let me bring that up. All right. So Deb Hallisey is a past and present caregiver, currently caregiver to her mother. She saw her father through congestive heart failure until his death in 2015. She lost her job due to caregiving issues and as a result founded her company, Advocate for Mom and Dad. And so she writes about caregiving issues for adult children of aging parents at her website, advocateformomanddad.com. Now, if you're a spouse, don't worry, these things apply equally well. Deb is the author of Your Caregiver Relationship Contract, and that's what she's talking about over these 4 weeks. It's a book that's a practical step-by-step guide for discussing relationship issues that arise between caregivers, their care partners, and she uses personal stories to illustrate how these techniques helped heal her relationships. She's a regional speaker for Artis Senior Living, does guest speaking for a variety of organizations, including Westchester County, New York, the Carriers Academy, and United Way. She is a certified caregiving consultant, a certified dementia practitioner, has a master's in leadership and supervision, and is currently working on a few other certifications related to caregiving as well. So she comes to us from the Princeton, New Jersey area, and we're glad to have you with us this week too. As I said, if you happen to miss week one, you can go to parkinsonoklahoma.com, click on video resources, and you will see that first week, which was about the emotions of caregiving. And tonight we're going to talk a little bit about new ways to communicate. I know Deb has a lot of good ideas. If you have questions as we go along, just plug them into the chat and we'll either get them at the end or perhaps pick up a couple as we go along. So Deb, welcome.
Thank you, Bruce, and thanks to everybody who has joined us. If you were able to be with us last week, welcome back. And if you're new, welcome to the second in a series. And this is called Learning New Ways to Communicate. So I'm going to give you a moment to take a look at this. Anna Quindlen is really one of my favorite authors. I love the way she writes. And this really struck me in her book, Lots of Candles, Plenty of Cake. The thing about old friends is not that they love you, but that they know you. And I think that is true about families as well. They love you, but they also know you. And because they know you, both family and friends can get to the heart of the matter and keep you honest. But they also know where the bodies are buried and can push your buttons like nobody's business. And what we're going to focus on now is how buttons get pushed by words and tone of voice when you communicate. And so we're going to talk about some new ways to communicate that really requires you to understand your own patterns and the way you communicate, as well as kind of thinking about your loved one as well. I kind of always thought of as a relationship as a dance. You know, a dance has music, it has steps, it's the way you hold one another. And that's true when you communicate as well. You know, your tone of voice, your words, you know, what you're doing when you're communicating, as well as what you're not doing, is all part of that communications dance. And if you think about relationships as a dance, if one partner changes the dance, the other has really no option to adapt to that new dance or stop dancing. And that's true of communicate as well. When you change the way you communicate, when you start to change the words you've used, the tone of voice, how you start the conversation, the time and place that you might have a conversation, you're really changing the way you engage in that communication dance. And you might have been doing it the same way for years. So before we go any further, I want you to take a moment to think of someone that you have difficulty communicating with. Doesn't need to be the person you care for. It could be, a child, a friend, a spouse, or the person you're caring for. And I want you to write down the name, okay? Because we're going to go back and talk about that. Who do you have trouble communicating with? And if you want to put it in chat, you're welcome to. If you want to just hold on to it, then that's okay as well. So when I became mom's caregiver and I kind of realized that we were getting stuck in some old patterns and that I needed to change the dance, that was one of those big aha moments for me, because really the dance my mother and I engaged in when I was growing up was I'm going to say awkward at best. Okay. And that's because really my mom is very traditional. She had expectations of me in terms of the way I would dress and the way I would interact, and even to the chores she assigned me were really based on very traditional female roles, okay, which was fine. There's a lot about that I loved, but I would get so angry and think it was so unfair that my brother got to do things I couldn't do because he was a boy, or he got out of doing things that I had to do because he was a boy. Like somehow vacuuming and dusting, 52 weeks of the year where all he had to do was mow the lawn during the summer really didn't seem fair to me. And so, my mother and I would get frustrated and we would get out of one another. We really were out of step in terms of the way how I wanted to live my life and what I thought was fair and what she considered was fair, given the fact that she had a very traditional viewpoint. And so some of that bled over into our caregiving when we first, started, when I first started this journey with her. And so I came to realize fairly quickly that we had to change the dance. We had to become a team and not be at odds with one another, or we really were going to risk our mother-daughter relationship and just really risk it. And the potential was there for there to be real harm. So, one of the things when I do presentations, I like to have a family story. And so this is the story of Alexa. And we're going to kind of follow this story throughout here. And what I want you to keep in mind is this is an example of how at times as caregiver, we think we have the perfect answer, but our loved one doesn't agree that that's the right answer. And so the way we talk about it, the way we communicate about it, it can become a real problem. So here's the thing. My mom is very resistant to change. I was frustrated with her inability to dial the phone, or she was frustrated with her inability to dial the phone. She was resistant to change and she was resistant to technology. And this is how that all comes into play for Alexa. My mother's landline and the phone that she has in her house, particularly in the kitchen, is easily 40 years old. And that phone allows her to have over 30 people on a 2-digit dialing system, which was great. You guys know from last week, she's legally blind. Her eyesight has gotten worse. And that 2-digit dialing system worked terrific until so many of the friends and family started using their cell phones. And all of a sudden she had to dial a 10-digit number, and her inability to dial that correctly, she found incredibly frustrating. And so it just seemed like every single time I was with her, I would hear about the phone problems, right? It's like, I can't dial the phone, I got the wrong number, I'm so frustrated. And what I also know is that phone is my mom's lifeline. She doesn't get out unless I take her. And so being able to call family and friends and get to know what's going on with them is really important to her. The problem was when my mom would say, I'm so frustrated, I can't dial the phone. You know, I could do nothing about it because the knowledge of how to reprogram that 2-digit system died with my dad. And so all I was hearing from my mother was I wasn't being a good caregiver every time she complained about the phone. Now, it wasn't what she was saying, but it's what I heard. Okay. And all mom heard was my frustration with her frustration. And so finally, I suggested that, well, let's get you an Alexa, Mom. I can plug in Aunt Pat's cell phone number and everybody else, and all you have to say to Alexa is dial Pat. But she was resistant, right? She doesn't like change. She doesn't like technology. And I was getting frustrated because I felt like, A, all she was doing is complaining, but B, in that complaining, I felt like she was saying, you're not caring for me in the way I need to be cared for. And so it really became a point of frustration for both of us. I have to tell you that. So what I want to do is I want to take a moment and talk about communication styles. Okay, we all have them. And there are good communication styles and there are bad communication styles. And these are some examples of some bad communication styles. So here's the other thing to recognize is that your communication style is not only yours, it's very much affected by your family as well. What I'm going to call your family of origin, the family that you grew up in. And so before you can change a communication style, you really need to understand it. So a good communication style is when we express our feelings openly and directly. And also when we encourage the other person to express their feelings openly and directly. So honest, open, direct discussion. That's good communication. Sarcasm is, I'm sad to say, one of my bad communication styles. That's when your words or your tone of voice conveys tension or hostility. And Mom, when she would talk about the phone and I would feel like she was saying I was a bad caregiver, that sarcasm would come out when she would ask me a question completely unrelated to the phone and I would answer her sarcastically. And that's what we do a lot of times because we're not openly and directly talking about what is bothering us or the problem. Our communication styles bleed over and the way we talk to folks bleed over into subjects that have nothing to do with what's frustrating us right now. My mother is queen of passive aggressive, okay? That's when you pout or withdraw or you say nothing or you storm out of the room or you storm out of the relationship. And my mother doesn't storm out of the room, but when I'm talking about storm out of the relationship, that passive aggressive for her becomes like cold silence, right? Which just grates on my nerves, okay? So she'll withdraw, she won't engage in conversation, all the things that just drive me crazy. And then there's counterattack. It's when you respond to someone criticizing you by you criticizing them. So it just becomes this back and forth volley of criticisms and past hurts. And it's really hard to break that if both of you are engaged in that battle. And then there's diversion. I have to admit, my mom is good at this. And that is, she's learning though. She's learning not to do this as much. That's when you're on one conversation and all of a sudden you start listing all the grievances and past injustices. And once again, you're back to, it had nothing to do with the original subject. You're just kind of throwing, wood on the fire, bringing everything up that's happened in the past. And denial, and I will do this, as I, don't admit I'm feeling angry or hurt or sad when I really do. And that comes out in other ways that can be self-destructive, like not eating healthy, right? Like when you're denying it and not admitting your feelings, you can fall down into self-destructive patterns. So again, I'm going to ask you to take a moment and think about this and write it down. So most people have more than one communication style, right? I want you to think about sarcasm, words or tone of voice that conveys tension or hostility, passive aggressive when you withdraw or say nothing or storm out of the room or relationship, when you respond to criticism with criticism in the counterattack, when you bring up past hurts and grievances as a diversion, and when you just don't admit your feelings. I want you to write down which, and I know you have at least one, which of these is your communication styles? Now, I've owned sarcasm and denial. I'm going to be honest. I'm getting better at it. So just take a moment to write down your own. I'm not going to see them. No one else will see them. But again, you can't change your communication style until you recognize your communication style. Here's my next question. I want you to think about your family of origin, your parents, grandparents, brothers, sisters. In your family of origin, did you express your feelings open, honestly, and directly? That good communication style. I can tell you, I know my mom didn't in her family, and we didn't when I was growing up either. It's a learned behavior that I had to really work on. And then the next question I want you to think about and or write down, okay, is do you guys actively listen and kind of validate one another's feelings, or do you get argumentative and get defensive? Again, think about it in your head answer to write it down. Now, this is really going to be interesting. Remember that person that I had you write down? Who's the one person you want to identify that you have a hard time communicating with? What is their bad communication style or styles? Take a moment to jot that down as well. So now that we have identified our past and bad communication styles, the question becomes, how can we improve them, right? Well, the first one is to listen, to really actively listen. And to actively listen, you have to maintain an open mind and not be thinking about the response you can't wait to make to what the other person just said. And that's a hard one for me, to really actively listen and not be formulating what I want to say back, right? Or get so mired in how it made you feel that you can't really listen. I'm going to tell you a quick story, and it has to do with Alexa. Actually, it doesn't play so much into Alexa, but it's going to play into a story that you're going to hear next week when we talk about boundaries. Okay. Not long after my dad died, my cousin Sue sent me a text message saying that there was a family party and this is the date and time and could Mom come? Okay. Now, I was sitting in the living with my mother and I said to her, oh, wow, Sue is having a family party next week and she wants us to come. That sounds great. What do you think? And there was complete silence on my mother's end. And I looked at her and she said to me, I feel like I died. Wow. I'm like, Mom, why would you say that? And she said, because everybody now, she said, with my eyesight, I can't text or do Facebook or any of that stuff. And now everybody asks you to come to family things and not me. And I feel like they don't even know I'm here anymore. And I thought, okay. And then I started thinking about the fact that, you know what, my mom was the social secretary of my mom and dad, and they had a very active social life. And her lifeline is her phone. So by me getting the text message, she did not get that phone call inviting us, which most of the time turned into a longer conversation, which just brightened her day. So the first thing I did was text my cousin Sue and say, Sue, we'd love to come. but I have to tell you, mom is really missing getting these invites and really missing talking to everybody on the phone. Can you please call her and invite her? It doesn't have to be today, but please do that. And I also let other family members know the same thing. And do I still get texts? Yes, I do. But more than anything, they might be checking a date with me. But everybody has honored that with my mom in terms of calling her and inviting her. That is active listening. That is not hearing her say, I feel like I'm dead, and going, what are you talking about? I'm here, you're not dead, I'm taking care, and all that silly path that we can go down. Okay. So really listen, and half the time that means putting aside your own emotions and listen to the emotion in what they're saying in the conversation that you're having. Have one conversation at a time, which means being focused. When you are really paying attention to someone, they feel wanted and worthy. And let me tell you something, that's hard in our role because we're so used to multitasking. I've gotten to the point where if I'm giving my mother monosyllabic answers, she says, are you on your phone while we're talking? Yeah, mom. And I know to put it away. So don't be on the iPhone or on your phone. Don't be on, your tablet or your computer or talking to other people or the TV. Have one conversation at a time, giving your focus to that person. Because in doing that, you can actively listen. You want to look for where your interests overlap, where you connect with what you both want. And let's face it, between mom and I, we both want her to be safe and healthy and happy. So where do we connect in that conversation to make that happen? And stay positive, right? It's easy to complain. It's easy to get it negative when we start to bring up past hurts and conversations. We don't want to do that, right? I'll tell you another quick story, and this does have to do with Alexa. And this is about, we talk about don't be negative or complaining. The other part of that is don't tease, because sometimes in teasing, there's a nugget of truth that is hurtful, right? This is part of the Alexa story, but I'm going to share it with you now. One of the things with my mom is the whole conversation around Alexa and getting her one happened for a year. It was multiple conversations. And one time after bringing this subject up again, she said to me, that Alexa thing, if I ask it, what's Kevin doing, can it tell me? Now, what you need to know is Kevin is my older brother and he lives 12 hours away. And when my mother asked me that question, I had to stop myself from laughing out loud because it just struck me as so funny and frankly cute that she would think that Alexa could say, Kevin is mowing the lawn, right? But she doesn't know about the technology. So I didn't laugh, I didn't giggle, I just said, no, Mom, Alexa can't tell you. This is the way it works. She can tell you the time. She can, if you ask her to play a Benny Goodman song, she can, but she can't actually see what people are doing and tell you that, right? And so the results, what are you trying to achieve? You want to clearly define the objective before you have the conversation. And when I started having a conversation for the objective, my objective, and I want you to hear those words again. My objective was that mom would have a way of talking to people who had a cell phone that she currently couldn't dial or talk to, right? And so all of our conversations kind of flowed around what I wanted those results to be. And I thought I was giving her some control. Well, turns out I wasn't. She had a really good reason. We talked earlier about your family of origin, right? And this really does come into play in terms of your communication style, right? And I'm talking you specifically. Are you a people pleaser? Right? I am. Because I never, I want people to be happy and I want to please them. I'm not always honest in my communications, which oftentimes will make me feel resentful, which I've come to realize can bring me back to that default bad communication style of sarcasm, right? So if open and honest communication is the goal of good communication, and I'm trying to keep everybody happy because I'm a people pleaser, that's not going to work. I'm also the only daughter, I'm the youngest child, so I'm the family peacemaker, right? And where that also doesn't work in terms of triangulation, in terms of communications, is because I'm the family peacemaker, I get involved in triangulation. That's where one person talks to me and the other person talks to me, but they never talk to one another, right? That's not good communication. And let me tell you what happens. My mom will get frustrated with her caregiver and she'll tell me about it. And my caregiver will get frustrated with my mom and she'll tell me about it. And I'm in the middle, which isn't good because that lets them both get away with passive aggressive behavior. So think about what role you have in the family. You know, were you the middle child? Were you the oldest? You know, because both gender and birth order play a role in how you communicate. Certainly, we know all the studies as women where we tend to not be as direct as maybe we should be because we're told as women we shouldn't be. I know that as the youngest child, that you sometimes defer to the older siblings, and maybe you shouldn't, right? The other thing that we often do when we are not willing to communicate effectively is we fear if we tell people honestly the way we feel and what we need, that we're gonna harm the relationship, right? There's gonna be a rift in the relationship. I want you to think about that for a moment. Think if there's ever been a time where you've been afraid to say something because, oh, that'll make my mom angry with me, and then, you know, I don't want that to happen. You know, she'll tell me I can't come see her, or whatever the scenario is that you might have run across. Because I want to be honest with you, if that fear is left over from childhood, you need to understand you have the right as an adult to set boundaries and have an adult to adult relationship, whether it is your parent or a faith leader or, you know, your kid's homeroom mother, right? We have the right to work with one another, communicate adult to adult. And oftentimes we don't effectively communicate because we feel guilty, right? I feel guilty. I'm not my mom's live-in caregiver all the time. I'll be honest with you. I feel guilty when I'm with her and I have such a long list that we really don't spend time together. But when I feel guilty, I also sometimes get angry. And again, that affects my communication style. So we need to take a step back and say, why do I feel guilty? Do I really need to take this on? And most of the time, we don't. Most of the time, we don't. It's such a negative emotion. And the other reason we sometimes hesitate to have that open and honest communication is because we're afraid of hurting our loved one, particularly if they are being sad, if they're sad or vulnerable. You know, we don't want to hurt them. The other thing that can cause a real problem in family communications are secrets. Okay. That secret is the elephant in the room and it damages relationships. You are much better off to pick the right time and the place to tell the truth than to say nothing. And then all of a sudden the secret is out and it blindsides them with that information. And part of the reason I think is we assign how the other person is going to react to the news in our own head. Oh, they're going to be angry. They're going to be hurt. They're going to be embarrassed. You know, we give them their emotions. I think you'd be surprised sometimes how often you're wrong when you assign someone else their emotions. I'll be honest with you. I learned this lesson through losing my dad. You know, I said earlier that my mom had a very traditional, and their marriage is very traditional, which is terrific. It worked for them. It really did, and I love that about them. But because my father never wanted to worry my mother, right? He never wanted her to worry. He was the man, he was going to take care of it. He never told her how sick he was that last full year of his life in 2014. Never told her how sick he was, never told her how bad he felt. And because I was going to the doctor's appointments with him, I knew it. But I also knew he didn't want her to know, and I kept that secret. And it wasn't until after my dad died and my mother was absolutely blindsided when I called her and said, the doctor's going to turn off the defibrillator tomorrow, that she realized he was going to die. It was not in her game plan. And so carrying that secret not only blindsided my mother, but I had no idea how it weighed on me that whole year when I knew he was dying and she didn't. So fortunately, it didn't damage the relationship with my mom. But early on, I was honest with her and said, Mommy, no more secrets. If I don't feel well, I'm going to tell you. If there's something wrong with this house, I'm going to tell you, and we're going to figure it out together. No more secrets. And that really has been huge for us. And I think was one of the first times that we really started to forge a team, because she knew I wasn't going to keep anything from her. So we've already done half of this work, right? You kind of identified, whether you wrote it down or just thought about, okay, these are really my destructive patterns. These are my bad communication styles. This is what I bring to it in terms of my gender and my birth order and my guilt and my fear of damaging the relationship. And so once you identify those destructive patterns, you know what's got to change, right? I have to stop being sarcastic. I have to actively listen and listen for the emotion, so I'm not reacting because I'm not really hearing what's going on, right? I need to stop. I need to figure out what the rules of fair fighting are, like not bringing up past hurts and past conversations and you always, you never, and stop communicating like that. And the third way to how to have an intentional conversation, or the third way to effectively communicate with everyone in your life, is to learn what it means to have an intentional conversation. Now, you're going to hear more about this in the next part of the series. But let's face it, when I talk about intentional conversation, I'm really talking about a conversation that's really hard to have. You want to avoid it because it's a hard one to talk about, right? And having an intentional conversation is key to setting boundaries, which is actually our next week's subject, okay? So name the change you need. Right? Like that seems like such a simple thing, right? But if you don't name it, the other person, your loved one, is not a mind reader, right? So my being able to say, Mommy, we need to figure out how to make this phone less frustrating for you because I'm upset that you're upset. So we need to figure out what to do, right? And when you have these intentional conversations, you have to be really careful of the language. You don't want to ever start the conversation off with, you always, you never, you don't, because that's going to put them in a place of defense and it's going to shut the entire conversation down. So my being able to say to her, Mommy, we together really need to figure out how to make the phone work for you because I get upset when you get, when you're upset. Right? So language is important. So is the time and the place, right? Like you're not ever want to have a conversation that's hard when you're both really angry or really frustrated. You want to pick the right time and the right place. And I want to spend a moment talking about time because the truth of the matter is, particularly for people my mom's age, who was 89, having a conversation that requires her to change something, like the way she dials the phone or the type of phone that she uses, really requires what I call the drip method. That's DRIP, drip. And as far as I'm concerned, the drip method is having a conversation and then letting it go, and then choosing another time and place to go back to it, either by bringing the conversation up again or choosing an opportunity to talk about it. And let me explain what I mean by that. Conversation with mom, we need to find a new way for you to dial the phone. Let's talk about it. What about Alexa, where I could just say, you could just say, call Alexa. I don't want the technology. I don't want stuff in my house like that. Okay. The next time we had that conversation, I bring it up again, is when she asked me about my brother, Kevin. Could Alexa tell me what he's doing? So I knew she'd been thinking about it, but she was still resistant to it. The third breakthrough moment was when we were visiting my aunt, who has an Alexa, and she loves it. And I happened to notice it, and had just finished lunch. We were sitting at my aunt's kitchen table, and I'm like, hey, Aunt Pat, how do you like your Alexa? I love it. I love it. Watch this. Alexa, what's the weather outside? And she gets the weather. Alexa, what time is it? And she gets the time. And she says to me, you try something. And I say, Alexa, play a Benny Goodman song. And it plays Benny Goodman. I don't say a word to my mother. I don't say a word on an hour's drive home. I don't say a word for the rest of the weekend. But the next time we start talking about the phone, and I say, I really think Alexa could help you, but I don't want, I don't know about that. I don't want the technology. Tell me more about it. What are the other things it can do? Right. So now we get to motivation. It just so happens that I am involved in a caregivers coalition with United Way. And United Way was starting a brand new project where they were going to put assistive technology in people's home, i.e. Alexa, in seniors' homes, i.e. Alexa, for a month, a free trial. If you liked it, you got to keep the Alexa. If you didn't like it, you got to keep it back. So I go to a meeting and I come home with an Alexa. We're sitting at the kitchen table, not playing cards, but we're sitting at the kitchen table. And like, Mom, every once in a while we talk about Alexa. And I immediately get, no, I don't want that in my house. And I said, well, it does a lot of stuff. She said, well, where would I put it? It's probably too big. Where would I put it? And I very gently open the box and hand it to her. And I say, Mom, this is an Alexa. And because she can't see, she was feeling it. So do you see how small it is? It would actually fit on the table next to your chair, and it really wouldn't take up a lot of room. Well, I don't know about this. Hey, Mom, here's the thing. We can keep it for 30 days, and if you don't like it, we can send it back. We can send it back right now if you don't want to be bothered with it. But Mom, if we try it and you like it, it's free. And she said, oh, well, if it's free. And that was the motivation to say yes, it was free. Okay, so remember I said earlier that, I said that my objective for this was that I wanted her to use it to dial the phone. Well, once we had Alexa installed and I had redone all my contacts in my phone so she could easily just say Pat, cell, and call, I got to why she was resistant. Because if she used Alexa to call people with her caregiver there was no privacy. Oh, I hadn't thought about that. And I hadn't dug any deeper to find out why she was resistant. I was used to her just saying, no, I don't want technology. I don't want it here. I mean, this is the woman who retired from the school system as a secretary when computers came in, right? This is just not what she wants to be dealt with. Guess what? My mother now has an Alexa in the living room, and every single light in that living room is hooked up to a smart plug, and she turns those lights off and on by voice command. For the first time in years, she is completely independent to turn on those lights. She doesn't have the mobility to stand up and do it, and I had to do it, or the caregiver had to do it. I can't tell me how many times I'd come back in the winter at 5 o'clock at night, and she was sitting in the living room in the dark because I'd forgotten to turn the light on before I went to ShopRite. She turns them off and on as well. The second one she asked for wound up in her bedroom because she loves to listen to music, and she has earphones, and she doesn't sleep well at night. So she listens to CNN News and ABC News. And in the middle of the night, when she wakes up, instead of turning the light on to look at a watch, she says, Alexa, what time is it? She's up in the middle of the night worrying about a snowstorm. She'll say, Alexa, what's the weather going to be? The third one we got was in the kitchen, because she can't see any longer to put a timer on. And so now she just says, Alexa, set alarm for 60 minutes. And when that alarm goes off, she knows what she needs to do. And because her handwriting has gotten so bad with this additional loss in eyesight, we have a grocery list on Alexa. She just adds stuff to that list as time goes on. And when I get to her house and we're working on the grocery list, I just pull it off of Alexa. Okay, final. When you're learning new ways to communicate, I want you to keep these things in mind. Don't parent the person you're caring for. And by parent, I mean it's the you should, you must kind of statements, but it's also your tone of voice. Be very, very aware of your tone of voice. And the words you use matter. You know, it's not just don't start this with you must, you should, but it's also the sarcasm and those words and the words where you counterattack, they matter. And just recognize that changes, even adding technology to the bag of tricks, is very, very emotional, both for you and the other person, because you are in fact changing something for them again. And there's already been so many changes. So we need to validate and acknowledge that this is probably going to be hard for them. Okay, so that's what I think about communicating effectively, not just with family members, but really with everyone in your life. So oh, who's got the puppy dog? I locked my dog out of my office because he was being so bad.
All right, Deb, thank you. Thank
You're
you so
welcome.
much. And appreciate, I think by sharing your story, we're all identifying